the negative implications or the repercussions of the atheistic evolutionary perspective. Yeah, is there an impact on society? Or is it really just a scientific idea?
If evolution is true, you should be out for number one. You should do everything you can to take advantage of other people's weakness. You're just keep fulfilling how we got here to begin with. You know, they come up with all these theories. Where did altruism come from and all that? But it doesn't matter. With evolution, you'll find something to back up opposite beliefs even. I like to read a lot of popular books on physics, but they always come back, evolution, evolution, evolution. And it's a little freaky to me to live in a culture, and I realize the overwhelming, overarching worldview that dominates intelligentsia, that dominates the thinking of, almost all these people, is not only wrong, but it's radically, radically, radically wrong. And it doesn't bother me anymore. You look at the history of the world, people believed things that were wrong for so long, and, anyway, so I'll give you another example of why I think there's a problem. I was speaking to a group of secular kids on a college campus, and I'm given all the typical arguments, the ontological argument, the cosmological, the arguments. And, I do a lot of public speaking, and I could read my audiences. And it was a small group, and I could tell I wasn't getting through to these kids. It just wasn't getting anywhere. And I stopped, and I shifted gears completely. And I said, when I was your age, and I was in college, every now and then the thought would enter my mind, maybe there is some big mama or there is some big daddy up there. It kind of entered my mind. And I always pushed it out. And the reason I pushed it out was, and this is interesting because where I got this, I used to think, if there is somebody up there, I'm in deep trouble. And and the amazing thing was, I watched the audience. It was like it hit a nerve on every last one of them. And that's the moment when I realized, for a lot of people, their opposition to God, the head thing is just an excuse because it's a heart thing. It's a heart thing. And in one sense, I was right. Even though I wasn't, quote, bad, I was in trouble. That's why people need the gospel. Look, deep down, don't you all kind of know how really rotten you are? Who here really thinks you're good? Deep down. And I think this is a result of, so I think people are scared. So I think a lot of the opposition to a creator stems from the moral implications of it. And so something like evolution comes along and wow. And you probably know 10 times more about this, the whole history of how it got started. As I said, Darwin didn't come up with it. You've got evidence from, Lucretius. It was a 1st century BC. He wrote this book on the nature of things, De Rerum Natura. It's all evolution. They had belief in this scattered through history. What Darwin supposedly gave was the mechanism, random mutation, natural selection, and so on. But like as I said, you studied it more, the evidence for it, you can interpret it that way, but you can interpret it different ways as well. But when they don't let you interpret it any other way, when you're derided as a Bible-toting hick and a Bible-toting fundamentalist or whatever and so on, then where else are you going to go? That's all you've got. We live in a day and age where science has the final word. And see, this is a great fallacy. The fact that a theory works and the fact that the theory can make accurate predictions is a totally separate issue from whether the theory behind the science is true or not. For 1,500 years, if you wanted to sail your boat from Genoa, Italy, to, say, Lisbon, Portugal, you could do it based on the science. But the problem was the science taught that the Earth sat immobile. Okay, Earth sat immobile in the center of the universe, and all the planets orbited the Earth in perfect circles at constant speeds. Now, for 1,500 years, it, quote, worked.
Okay, wait. I know exactly where you're going with this. So let me see if I sum this up here, okay? And by the way, I remember taking a philosophy of science class, and what you observed is very interesting, and that is this. One thing we learned in a philosophy of science class is this, is that all the scientific breakthroughs took place when people were willing to look outside established dogma. Which tells us ultimately that science should not be dogma, but rather it should be the doctrine of discovery.
It's a joke. Science started out as a revolt. They called it the scientific revolution. You know, because here's the thing too. Christianity and all that was dominated by the science of Aristotle. Okay, Aristotle was the Darwin of everything, the whole idea. The reason the Christianity, they crucified poor Galileo of heresy. Not one thing Galileo taught was contrary to the Bible. It was contrary to the Bible as the church had interpreted through the filter of Aristotle and theistic evolutionists today. And to me, I have much more respect for Richard Dawkins. Okay, I have intellectual respect for Richard Dawkins than I do for theistic evolutionists.
Now, hold on a second. You said the word theistic evolutionists. Now, before we go any further, this is
Don't get me off on that. Don't get me off on that.
No, actually, I do want to.
All right.
So,
okay, I gotta be nice.
The term theistic evolutionist applies to people who believe in a God, but also accept this idea of mainstream or macro evolution, that there's an
God created through evolution.
Right.
And if God created through evolution, I've said.
Okay, but see, this is where I'm going now. Hold on a second. So this is where I'm going. And that is this. Obviously, we can affirm the idea that we do see adaptation, and what some may even call microevolution.
No one denies that.
What we can observe, we can test, but the idea of macroevolution from one species to another is completely something that is another category. But here's a question I have for Dr. Coleman, and I have for you. I'd love to hear you guys' response on this, and that is this. The God that we see in Scripture, everything we've learned about him from Genesis all the way to Revelation, is this compatible? Is it any way compatible?
Absolutely not.
Wait, I didn't finish my question.
Absolutely not. Is it compatible with evolution?
That's exactly where I'm going.
It's utter. If I thought for 1 minute evolution were true, I would say to God, he's cruel and he's a liar. Okay? Because he creates this horrible, cruel way and gives us this asinine story about a 6-day creation, which absolutely cannot possibly be true if evolution is true, about a fully formed Adam who then had life, absolutely false if evolution is true. Eve coming out of the side of Adam, are you kidding me?
We'd have to throw that out.
Are you kidding me? If evolution were true, God's a liar. The Scripture is a lie.
Dr. Coleman, your input?
And I'd like to change that a little bit. When we're looking at this, that is, yes, the two theories are incompatible because one says that life began without God. The other one says that life can only begin with God. So, of course, they're opposites. To prove one disproves the other. But most people have both of these ideas in their head. Okay, and the issue that I have to deal with on campus is it possible to believe in both of them? And my response to that is, yes, absolutely, it is possible to believe in both of them. People are not logical. They believe in things that are opposites. But I tell you, there's a point that you have to stop. That is, you can believe in both. The problem is you can't do both.
Yeah.
So that is, we have great examples of this. Ho Chi Minh, he was a communist, but he believed in self-determination for people. But in practice, he could only do one, and he was a communist. Thomas Jefferson, he was a slaveholder, and yet he believed that all men were created equal. He believed in both of those, but in practice, he could only do one, and he owned 600 slaves in his lifetime and only set 3 free. He believed in both. But when push came to shove, he could only do one of them. Yeah. And that's the problem that people run into. That is, we have strong correlations between belief in evolution and lack of church attendance. That is, they go against one another.
My thing is this, and I always say this, is like, if we can accept Jesus lived, Jesus died, Jesus rose again, any other miracle is second place compared to that. You know, and so this discussion about creation evolution, I really appreciate just the input you are sharing, and especially what you just said right there with this idea. You can theoretically compromise and create this, bring these two together, but at the end of the day, you're going to be only able to live out, practice only one of those.
One of them.
Well, I know we have much to talk about, and I know our audience has lots of questions for both of you. Well, we've heard Major Coleman's take and Clifford Goldstein's take. But what about your take? After the break, we will be going to our live audience to see what questions they have. And your question may be there too. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've had some great conversations with Major Coleman and Clifford Goldstein on the topic of evolution and creation. But now it's time to hear from our live audience. What questions do you have for our guest today? Right over there.
What about ancient civilizations that predate the creation timeline?
I get asked that question a lot, and the answer is actually very simple. There are none. So we have to say, how are you going to date that ancient civilization? Human writing is the only accurate, absolutely accurate evidence that we have to date anything. That is, somebody wrote it down and they wrote their date, which we can collect, which we can connect to our dates. Many people are surprised that we have no datable human writing that predates 2500 BC.
Wow.
None. None. Not a few. Zero. Absolutely zero. Once you leave human writing behind, now you're going to carbon-14 and pottery records and all the assumptions that go into that. And of course, we've already talked about this, carbon-14 dating, which dates things that are alive, bones or plants, all right, which would include papyrus. They are not older than the biblical record.
And 2500 BC is roughly the estimate of
Noah's flood.
Noah's flood, which wiped out civilizations
that
existed. Okay, amazing. Any other questions? Right over there.
If you believe in evolution, wouldn't that mean that you believe in death before sin? And doesn't that contradict the Christian worldview?
Yeah, it absolutely in every way does. I mean, when you read the biblical creation account, there's just death is the enemy. You know, in the beginning, there's no death at all. There's only the warning of death if they ate from the tree. But again, if you read the whole gospel story, and particularly Romans 5, Paul 6 times has Adam bringing death, Jesus bringing life. Adam brings death, Jesus 6 times. Paul's whole theology of the cross, the whole plan of salvation, everything is built upon the idea of one man, Adam bringing death, Jesus, sometimes called Jesus the second Adam, undoing what the first Adam did. So yeah, so again, I think you're right. They're not logical. There's no possible way evolution can be true and the Bible be true.
So if we do accept this idea, hypothetically, you know, God used death and millions of years to bring about life, what does it do to the gospel?
Well, it ruins it. It ruins it. I mean, unless you think Paul was a dupe and Paul was wrong. And there are people who say that. Paul just misunderstood. The gospel is predicated on the idea that one man brought death and sin into the world, and Jesus came to ultimately undo that. But here, Jesus comes, lives, suffers. God uses billions of years of violence, suffering, and death to create human beings. And then Jesus comes to eradicate sin, suffering, and death, the very means God used to create us to begin with. Yeah, the honest, again, I find more honesty among atheists than I find among theistic evolutionists. The true atheists atheist evolutionists know how ludicrous it is to try to harmonize the Bible.
You can mix those ideas until you try to explain it. That makes logical sense. All right? That's when I said the problem is you can believe them, you just can't do them. That is, you cannot explain it in some logical fashion. That's the problem.
Excellent. Any other questions? Right over there.
If evolution is not real, then why do apes have opposable thumbs?
If my Toyota truck didn't evolve from a Maserati, why do they both have four wheels? You see what I'm saying? People say, well, there's a similar genetic code with apes and humans and so on, therefore we must have evolved from them. Well, we had a similar creator, and he created them in similar ways, and so on. So to me, that's a perfect example of assuming you're interpreting the opposable thumb through the presupposition of evolution, when I just say God created them that way.
Cliff,
that's all.
Let me back you up. That is, you're using homology. That is the science of similar designs and structures to say, I assume that came from evolution. You could just as well say, I assume it came from a similar designer. That is, it's what in science we call that bias. You're bringing your bias to interpret the evidence. Take away your bias, and that's not there. You could ask the question without the evolutionary or the creation science bias, and you could say, we have similar structures among species. What does it mean? Now that's an honest question.
That's a fair question
That's
right
a fair
there,
question.
because it's removing that
right.
presupposition there.
Right.
Interesting. Any other questions? Right over there.
I wanted to know, why did God create this universe?
We believe in a triune God that's loves. There's love within the Trinity. And that love, I believe God wanted to share with created beings, okay? Because we don't believe that the triune God was created. It's, again, how to understand it. It always existed. And yet it existed in love. And He, the Lord, wanted to create beings that could share in that love as well.
God didn't create us so we could love Him. He created us so He could love us. Another way of looking at it.
Interesting. And I think this is part of the mystery of eternity, is to understand and ask the Creator Himself.
Yes.
Why am I here? I heard somebody once put it this way. They said that the two most important days of your life is the day you're born and the day you discover why.
Wow.
And maybe the second one will be ultimately answered in eternity.
Amen.
Any other questions? Right over there.
If in the future evolution is proved to be the truth, as a man of science, could you live with that?
I would love to see that day, and I've offered them $20,000 to come forward and show it to me. I would love nothing better than that. That is, I'm not only a scientist, I'm also a law professor. That is, it's an adversarial system. That's what I live with. That is, when I go to court, the judge doesn't say, you know what, you both made such great arguments, you both win. Isn't that wonderful? No. There are winners and there are losers. Come forward, let me see your evidence, let me see your challenge. That is, as we say, either put up or change your origin theory.
Amazing.
What I would add from science, if I thought evolution for a moment were true, proven however you could, I would flat out reject my religion. I would basically curse God, you know, and just tell him, burn me in hell, destroy me when it's done. I wouldn't want to serve a God like that. So that's what I think the issues are.
Right, so. And I think the question can be turned around on its head, and that is this. If evidence for Christianity was true, would an atheist, a skeptic, agnostic be willing to become a Christian? And the reason why this question is so important is because this question actually has been posed to atheists, and their answer oftentimes were absolutely not, which shows this is not a scientific issue.
It's a hard thing.
There's a heart issue also that is part of this.
Yeah.
Dr. Coleman, Cliff, I feel like we could keep talking for days and barely scratch the surface of this topic. I've appreciated this. My mind is ready to explode. I wish I could have you here for 100 more days to talk about this, wrestle with this, and just to hear and understand a little bit more of the wisdom that God has given both of you. Thank you so much. Yeah. As we wrap up tonight's discussion, it's clear that the topic of creation versus evolution touches on some of the most fundamental questions about our existence. Both Dr. Major Coleman and Clifford Goldstein have shared insights that challenge us to think deeply about the origins of life, the evidence we rely on, and the beliefs that shape our understanding of the world. The debate between creation and evolution isn't just an intellectual exercise. It strikes at the heart of how we see ourselves and our purpose in this universe. Whether you resonate more with the arguments for intelligent design, or maybe you see some merit in the scientific explanations of evolution, it's important to remember that these questions have real implications for our lives. There's something deeply human about wanting to know where we come from and why we're here. As you reflect on what you've heard tonight, I encourage you to consider your own beliefs and how they shape your view of the world. Ask yourself, what do I believe about the origins of life? And how does that belief impact the way I live each day? Well, my hope for you is that you will continue to seek the truth with an open heart, and that you too will find peace and purpose in the knowledge that there is a divine designer who has made you, who knows you, and loves you. That's all for now. We'll see you next week on Hope